Hi all, Rishi with Outperform BSMD Consulting with you today. So today we're going to have a look at how I, as an admissions consultant, review and analyze and give feedback on student essays, as opposed to Onyx, which is the first of its kind AI model designed for instant personalized essay feedback. So let's get right into it. I have a student's common application essay here that I have never seen before, and we're going to go through it and carefully provide the feedback that I would give if I was reviewing this student's essay. So I got the student's essay up on the screen here. You can see the prompt was one of the common application prompts, which is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful that they believe their application would be incomplete without it. This sounds like you, then please share your story, right? You probably heard this prompt before if you've looked at the common application prompts. First thing I want to do, go through here and read through the entire essay, get a feel for it, and then we'll start to dissect it. Okay, fantastic. So we read through the initial draft of the essay. Now, the really best way that I approach this is I look at each paragraph in isolation one by one. Okay, so we'll start with the very first thing that I look for, which is a compelling hook. And I'm reading this first sentence here. You can imagine an admissions officer sitting at their desk, right? And they see this first sentence of the essay, which is, when I first sat down at my grandmother's ancient sewing machine in the winter, blah, 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 blah. This first sentence, right? I, as a consultant, would say this does not really serve as a strong hook for this essay. And the reason for that is when you think about creating a hook, the biggest thing is making sure it makes you ask the question, the reader ask the question of, okay, that's interesting. Can you tell me more? What's going on? What should I think about? And it prompts you, excellent hook will prompt you to ask the question, what exactly is going on? That's where some of the strategies like starting in the middle of a scene or giving a teaser with a statement that makes the reader double take can be very effective. You're like, oh, what's going to happen next? I don't know what's going on. Instead of this concrete, uninspiring scene of imagining we sit here at a sewing machine, it doesn't really make me think, whoa, where could we be going? It makes me feel more, okay, this sounds like a very traditional story. There's nothing I'm asking. Like, I have an idea that where this is going. Even though you end up seeing that it does come into a different perspective, it doesn't really draw my attention. So that's the biggest thing, is this first paragraph's really, especially the first sentence more than anything else, it's got to be like, okay, what's going to happen next? So that is where I'll go ahead and put in something like the hook, right? Hook is weak, doesn't make reader ask. Okay, so what's going to happen next? Or rather, next, or I want to read on. Okay. All right. So next thing I'm reading is we're setting the context of what's going on, right? What's the scene like? And this is where that's setting. The biggest thing here is that I see this picture that they're trying to go for, and you have amidst a whirl of activity. But this is very much something that we see throughout the essay, which is an issue of we're telling instead of showing. Okay. So even with that first line, if we were to stick with it, it's really not giving me the feeling of being there with you, seeing this, especially the backstage at the community theater, what that feels like. And that's where something that we'll see over and over again, as you might have seen as you were skimming the essay in the beginning, is show, don't tell. And you'll hear these words over and over again. What does that mean? Make it vivid. Make the imagery really pop, really stand out. That means in the physical environment, right? What does it look like? And how are you feeling? So yes, this is introducing the scene, but the very first paragraph is super important to really catch attention, because these admissions officers are reviewing hundreds and hundreds of essays, right? You want to have that really catching first paragraph. Okay, next thing we'll look at is the next paragraph. Remember, we're going paragraph by paragraph here. Okay, So we see this is a chronology of a specific moment that in time when we introduce, okay, this is a costume design role. And so here we can see it's very much a chronology. It's very much saying this happened and then something else happened that caught their attention. This follows exactly what we talked about in the last point, which is it's just a telling of what has happened step by step or time moment by time moment. And this doesn't really generate any intrigue. It doesn't make it exciting. It doesn't bring anything either that talks about the writer, right? The student who's writing this. I know nothing about them from this part of the essay. This doesn't tell me really anything other than, okay, we're talking about being a costume designer, right? And they're going for okay, I initially declined, right? They're trying to explain that it was like not their first thing to go to, but it's expressed in a very, I'm just going to tell you this process way, and it's drawn out like a whole paragraph just to say that. Really got to think about what does this paragraph communicate? Or what is this paragraph's purpose? It's probably a better way to say. What is the purpose of this paragraph? What are you communicating to the reader about the story or about yourself? Not much. And the other thing to consider here is, even if we want to kind of set this scene, we want it to be much more vivid. We want to show, don't tell, right? So more of that, just make it dialogue, for example, would be a great way to approach this, to make it much shorter, right? To get into that conversation with Mr. Robinson, but just in dialogue, and reduce all of this kind of chronology, this telling instead of showing component. And the fact that this doesn't really serve a purpose. And again, as we go through all this, really the huge thing is, right, each paragraph has to serve a purpose. The first paragraph, and especially the first sentence, right, have to serve the purpose of generate intrigue, right? I want to learn more as the reader. What are we talking about? What's going on? I don't have the full story. I want to understand it. And that next paragraph very commonly is to set, what are we talking about? But in a concise and demonstrative way, rather than just telling. Again, show, demonstrate. Those are the words that we say here when we think about, okay, I want to visualize what's going on, bring in the senses, right? So am I hearing what's in the dialogue, right, is a great component of the senses. Or if you're talking about a physical environment, what does it look like or smell like where you are, right? So these are the big things that kind of go across the board when we talk about show, don't tell. But especially here, this is very much like here's the chronology, very telling. Okay, so now we go to the next paragraph here. All right, this gets a little bit better, right, with the description of what this environment is like. And then we get into here the valuable lessons. All right, it's fantastic that you're thinking about this. You do want to be hitting on what was the value of this experience, right? So awesome, right? We want value of experiences. And then but this doesn't really tell me anything about you. So yes, it's using the buzzwords, but we don't really just want to use the buzzwords. Don't use just the buzzwords, which is like collaboration, determination, creativity. Right? You're trying to say that that's what I am. Instead, show how you demonstrated it. These qualities. So this is where anecdotes come in so powerfully, right? In the form of anecdotes. You want to be able to tell me about a specific moment where you really showed collaboration or had collaboration in this environment, really showed determination, really showed creativity, and make it vivid. Don't just tell me what happened in those events, as you'll see later in the story, in the essay here, but really bring me into that moment. Let me see how you're feeling, express that, show me that. Okay. So that's the big thing with this paragraph, right? But good attempt at getting into the idea of what's the physical space feel like? What does it look like? Okay, still got to go more vivid than that. So now we're talking about what the author is seeing, right? Again, we're going back to chronology of a moment in time when we're watching a particular event occur, okay? So this is right, you're giving a context for what's going on, what's happening right now. And then we go into, okay, how is this impacting me? Which is the right direction. You want to be thinking about, okay, what was the meaning and the value behind this experience? That's super important. So let's remember to include that. Here we go. Great. Always think about the value of each experience. Perfect. But when we approach this, right, we want to show it, not tell, right? So saying the spirit of camaraderie moved me, instead say something more along the lines of, I felt XYZ. How did you feel in that moment when you saw that? What were, maybe your eyes had a certain expression on them, maybe you had a facial expression you're thinking about. Maybe think about the specific moment in time where you're like, I felt a really strong like surge of excitement or strength, and all these components that you felt, right? You want to really sit down and dig into them and say, okay, what did that feel like? Because that demonstrates true thoughtfulness rather than just saying outright that you saw the strength and the unity and the value of each team member. Okay, we'll go on here. Now we see, okay, the chronology continues, and we see this very bland kind of way of communicating this event that's here. And then you go back into another reflection of that moment, but this was so fleeting. And which is fine if the emphasis is then on this component, which it seems like they're going for. And we look at this and we see, again, still very like simple, just outright telling you as if you were just explaining to someone what a series of events was. And instead of that, we can really spend more time with showing, not telling, especially what was going through your head. Because what this does is shows your thoughtfulness, your intentionality, even as you take this and you say, okay, I'm seeing this, what does that mean to me? What does that mean for what I care about? It reflects your values much more than the way this is phrased, where it's very linear, right? Tell me this, which is what you want to communicate, but in the form of your emotions and expressing your values, not outright. Again, not just stating them, but tell me the moment, tell me the feeling, bring it, make it real, make it human, make it feel like I'm talking to you and telling the story, or you're telling the story to me. So the next paragraph is backtracking again to what is this costume designer role? Okay, what this means. And so I think, this is good. It presents a juxtaposition of what the kind of perceived definition of costume designer could be, and then presents, but this is how I feel about it. This is my excitement, right? This cannot express the thrill of seeing. And this is great, especially if it followed up a wonderful, vivid, imagery, rich anecdote or anecdotes that we could transform these sections into, that we said we needed more showing instead of telling. So this is fantastic in terms of taking that reader from the moment of, okay, this is what as a costume designer, and then this is why I love this. This is the excitement. But it doesn't hit as hard unless you have that vividness before it, right? That vivid imagery. So not as strong without imagery before. Same thing here with the profound sense of belonging here that you talked about that sense of belonging, but it's so literal, it's so outright, it's not showing how you felt that camaraderie. And so as we come in here, we think about how you felt, bring this component into it without saying it. Show it. Give me the expressions, give me the feeling, right? Okay. Again, this is a great summary of the moments, but express the moments as vivid anecdotes. So it's exciting and that you feel your excitement. When an admissions officer feels your excitement in the form of anecdotes, it's truly meaningful and much more impactful than just outright stating those things. All right, so this last sentence here, when you think about your paragraph, you want to have everything in the scheme of there needs to be a flow to your narrative, right? So each paragraph wants to connect to each other. That makes the most easy to follow structure for your essay. And it makes it a lot easier for the reader to follow and get the most value of what you're saying. And so I look at this last paragraph, and in the scheme of the entire essay, actually, we can see this similar issue come up, is where the last paragraph doesn't really introduce us to the next paragraph that's coming up, right? I'm sure you've learned this in English class. It's really important that when you look at your paragraphs at the beginning and the end of each paragraph, is there a flow? So what does that sentence look like? This sentence gives that moment of reflection, which is good. It can be stronger, and it really can transition into the next paragraph a little bit more clearly. And even more applicably in the other paragraphs, always be thinking about, how am I going to see, as a reader who hasn't read my essay before, flowing into the next paragraphs. So that's the other thing, is overall narrative flow. We want to be looking at how the different paragraphs go together. I think even more so in the beginning, when you kind of jump from anecdote to anecdote in this essay, it's a little bit more difficult to follow. So really having a sentence that concludes and pulls together that paragraph and possibly even introduces what's coming next. So then we'll look at the last paragraph here, which is the author's attempt to go ahead and say, okay, this is all the value that I've gotten from these experiences. This is why it's so exciting. And that's exactly the direction that we want to go with this concluding paragraph, is really deep into what was the actual value of this. And I think even here, this is a very superficial way to do it, and it can go a lot deeper. And one of the best ways to do that is, one, you have to actually sit down and think about, what really was the value of this experience? Why was this so important to me? The author goes at a superficial level into, okay, there were good bonds formed, learn things about people and about what they enjoyed, and that's great. You want to dig deeper to why that is significant to you. Okay, so that's the second part. So when you think about, we'll put a comment here. When you think about introspection, what value does this provide for me in the future? What significance does it have for me? And really what that means is connecting it to your future goal, right? And I think that's the more simplified way to say it, where you want to be able to take what that message is, such as, I form bonds in this essay, and I ask myself, why does that matter? What does that mean for you? And that is not really discussed here. It's really important to be able to connect the story and experience that you had, reflect on it, and then be able to say, okay, what does this mean for me as an applicant, as an individual, for the future? And that ties into something that we also really talk about a lot when it comes to a strong essay, which is connecting to a larger theme. And so these go hand in hand, where you want to make sure that you're not just presenting your story, your anecdote in a bubble. You want to be able to connect it to a bigger idea of, okay, why does this matter? Why should the admissions officer look at this and care what this experience meant for me, my learning, what I experienced? And that has to do with being able to say, okay, this is the reason that this is important, this experience as a costume designer, is because I found that excitement and that I want to pursue this, for example, or I developed the skills that allowed me to better build relationships, which is important to me because either, let's say, as an individual, but also as someone who is going into career X, Y, or Z, what does that mean? Why is that critical? And how does it have an impact on people? Yes, it matters to you. Why should I care as an admissions officer? And so this will depend on the area of industry and school you are applying to some degree. You want to connect it to some extent to a skill that is important and valued within what you want to do. Really being able to take those 3 steps of, okay, here's an anecdote. Here's what I learned from it in a very thoughtful way. Go into how you feel, what that means for you. And then number 3 is connect it to what it means for you as an individual, as a student, on a campus community, right? In your next steps in your career, whatever it may be that your next steps are. You want to be able to pull that together. The other final thing about this is that there's an attempt to bring it back to the prompt. This is important that you connect that ending point back to the prompt, because you want the admissions officer to see that this really does connect full circle to the original question that was asked for the essay. It can be more powerful in the way it's expressed here. Tell me more about this significant part of my identity. And this is also where you can bring in the, okay, for the future, what does this mean? Identity. Why is that so important? Why are these components of your experiences so relevant to that? And in this, it almost diminishes it in the bringing it in a very superficial sense. The conclusion, be more in depth, be more thoughtful. And really, the issue here is that it really requires the author to sit down and think intentionally and really try to understand why they felt the way they did, what they value, what gives them excitement beyond just in the moment, and defining what they care about. And this is something that requires time and investment and a lot of conversation, the right questions. And really, a big part that a lot of students miss and don't see is that because it requires that energy and time, and that's where having some guidance can be really helpful in trying to identify those important questions and delve really deep into your own emotions, introspection, and reflection of your experiences. So those are the really significant pieces of feedback I give for this essay. We will go ahead and jump over to Onyx now, actually, and see what Onyx has to say about this essay.
All right, so now we are in the Onyx software, and this is the first ever AI software that is built to generate essay feedback instantaneously for application essays. So what we have here, we went ahead and we popped in our essay prompt and essay draft, and we're gonna go ahead and just start and generate a first set of expert essay feedback using the Onyx software.
So this is going to take about 30 seconds at most to analyze this essay and output Onyx feedback.
And look at that, we have our first set of essay feedback. So I'll give you a chance to read over that. And what I'm going to be looking for is the exact place where it is giving us feedback about how to strengthen the essay. All right, so here you can see what does Onyx give us as the most important things to change to make this essay better. And that is, first thing is more specific details and examples to illustrate your impressions more effectively, which aligns exactly with one of the most critical points that we talked about as reviewing this essay from a consultant perspective, which is let's be specific, give those strong anecdotes. Okay, next thing we see is to use specific phrases that will give those specific details. So it's actually identifying a specific part where it's saying where the cast was inexperienced in finding their footing, to instead give a very clear, anecdotal, illustrative example of what that looks like, what that feels like. And this is where Onyx is really exciting, because it will identify specific parts personal to your essay that you have input to give you concrete places to make changes to improve your essay. Okay, and then we go on and we can see some additional feedback here to create a more concrete conclusion, okay, that ties the essay together. This resounds one of the key pieces that we talked about as well, right? Being able to take all of those experiences, those moments that you talked about, and pull them together, bring it into the context of your future goals and how those experiences have shaped you. And that is exactly what Onyx is saying here. We talked about a conclusion that is excellent, must have the self-reflection and the application to future goals. The beautiful thing about Onyx is that you can regenerate feedback. And so you can save this with that cloud in the top corner and then go ahead and we're going to regenerate feedback to get another expert perspective. And this just takes seconds to get another full length, different perspective of high level feedback on how to change the essay to make it exceptional. And in this feedback, you'll notice the format is different. We'll go ahead and look at the critical points about how to improve this essay. Okay, and so this is our 3 big points here that Onyx is saying are the most important to change. So first thing here is to, one, incorporate some examples of your own experiences as a costume designer. What did you learn from doing specific actions in that role? And this is huge. This is taking this essay prompt, which wants us to talk about what it is that is meaningful to us that we can now see from Onyx's words that we must focus on and show to a much more significant degree. So it's giving us specifically, okay, when you were a costume designer, what did you learn? What did you do? It even gives examples, making costumes, designing the set, and it will extrapolate based on what you have shared to really give you the most specific individualized feedback possible. Okay, and this again ties right back to what we talked about, which is be concrete with your anecdotes, right? The second point that's to improve this essay in this feedback from Onyx is to expand the lessons, the takeaways. This is your reflection, the introspection that is so important when creating a compelling application essay. How have you developed your skills as a designer or gained new knowledge? And then finally, back to the conclusion. You'll see this reiterates exactly from the last feedback. And the beautiful thing about Onyx is that you get this dozens and dozens, hundreds of feedback if you want for the same essay draft. And those things that repeat strengthen the conclusion, giving a specific way to do that, a concrete action plan for what you're going to do moving forward. What is the future implications? And then that last question there, directly asking you, what changes have you made in your life? How have you grown? That is so critical. And since as you see that repeat in your dozens of iterations, you can see that those are the most important things. They come up in different sets of feedback when you use Onyx. We're going to go ahead and generate one last third set of feedback from Onyx for this essay draft and have a look at what it gives us. Okay, fantastic. That second paragraph starts telling us about how can we strengthen this essay. And immediately you see specific, more details about the lessons learned, right? This was the core of our conversation when we looked at this from the consultant perspective, and really this resonates with what we want to focus on when we are creating an exceptional essay, okay? And what I love about this particular set of feedback that Onyx is generating here is that it's giving those questions that we talked about are so important for a writer to be able to really dig deep into their emotions and understand what to look for. What did the writer learn about collaboration determination? Go beyond just the superficial learning. How did their sense of identity shift? Not just that there was one, but rather get really into the details of what that means, and it prompts you very in individualized way to make you think about that. And then also what specific experiences have made you realize how important theater is. And these are really important questions because the way these are phrased are what allow you to think about it from a different perspective and make your essay really powerful. The next piece of feedback here is suggesting the writer includes a few sentences about how the experiences have shaped them as a person and their future, right? This is the core of what we have been talking about, which is how it affects your future, how these experiences contribute to who you are, that deep level of introspection. Finally, what's really cool about this particular essay feedback that Onyx is giving is that it is giving clearly what specific details, what areas to expand upon. So here it's saying when the author talked about what it felt like to be part of the community in the theater, right? actually identifying that as a place where you want to give more details. All right. And this is exactly what it tells you. The essay should include more about the production, how it impacted the writer, and even a third point, which is what about the insights can we expand upon? What it felt like to work on opening night, celebration, all those components that aren't explicitly said in the essay, but they are expanded upon to address what those experiences could be to make this essay so much more powerful. Really exciting software that we have, onyxadmissions.com. You can use it for free. Check it out. Try it with your essay or learn how to use it with a sample essay and get a real grasp of how powerful this tool is, how it gives the perspective of so many different expert consultants. This has been built by people who know admissions, and it has been refined by students who really allow this software to be geared toward making it simple, straightforward to really develop your essays. And you can do this with as many revisions of your essay as you want. You can do this hundreds of times, and it takes mere seconds. What took us, any individual as a consultant, many minutes, hours even, to give really detailed feedback is done in seconds, and you can get the perspective of so many consultants, so many experts in admissions within minutes. And that's really where the power of Onyx is. Not to mention, there is a number of other tools that Onyx has that you can use to streamline your process, optimize your application, and maximize your chance of success.